honored to invite Mr. Larry Kasanoff to speak with us. Mr. Kasanoff has produced films in Hollywood, among them the Mortal Kombat series, True Lies, Blue Steel, and we are honored to have him with us. The Masterclass will be moderated by Mr. Ido Aharoni.
Amazing, so many firsts, right? So many firsts. But, you know, first things first, Larry. First of all, welcome to Tel Aviv.
Thank you, great to be here.
Welcome to the Cinematheque. This Cinematheque was built with the help of Goldie Hawn, which I'm sure you know from the industry. And she has not been here since 1989. But you're here, and that's what, at least she built the place. Exactly. Her agent's then came and was the guy who got her to make the commitment. So let's start with your story. Tell us about your upbringing, where you're from. I know you're from Boston, and you told me that you knew that you're going to be doing this at a very early age.
Well, this is what I said the other night at the opening festival, that I knew I wanted to do this since I was a little kid, and I've been planning this since I was 11 years old. And so I think there's two themes that maybe we want to talk about tonight. One is what I like to call a touch of the madness, which we'll go into. I have to be a little crazy to be innovative and really believe in new ideas. But the other thing is you have to plan, and you have to work and work and work and work and work. So I'm no kidding. I was planning this since I was 11 years old. I had this whole plan, and fortunately it worked. But you know, you got to start.
So you grew up in Boston.
Yeah, I grew up in Boston.
And what was your first memorable moment with moving images? When did you fall in love with movies?
I was a little kid, I don't know, 9 or 10 or something, and my dad took me to a James Bond movie, and when we left, I said, okay, there's two things I want. First, I want to be that guy James Bond, but who's the guy in the, what's that name, like the producer, Cubby Broccoli, presents James Bond. What does that guy do? And my father told me, I said, that's what I want to do.
And since then you love broccoli.
I do, actually.
Me too, I love that. But this explains, you know, the fact that your first fascination with moving images, with filmmaking, was a Bond movie, explains a lot of what we saw on the screen, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I guess.
You like action, you like moving.
You like action, yeah.
Now what's also important is to know that you're not afraid of taking risks.
I think you have to take risks. I love taking risks. I think that I don't know if you guys were there the other night, but so I don't want to be redundant, but you know, the audience, and you work for your audience. You don't work for the producer, you don't work for the director, you work for your audience. And the audience wants new and different. And life, the current of the river of life will always try and pull you towards the middle. It will always try and pull you towards the tried and true. And the only way to get away from that is creativity. And the best way to be creative, I believe, is to be a little crazy. You have to embrace those crazy ideas, because those are the ideas that work. Almost everything you just saw here, everyone told me my career was going to be over before I did. Virtually everything, except for True Lies. Everything else everyone thought was not going to work. You have to take risks, because that's what the audience wants to see. And by the way, it's not just me. I mean, look at Star Wars was going to be a failure. I mean, all these things are like that. You have to, if you want to go for a big hit, you've got to embrace the madness.
And you gave me an example that when you came out of school, you were offered a job with HBO, but then you decided to take a risk.
Yeah, so the way I planned to get into the film business, I said as a little kid, is I tried to get into it in the United States as many good high school and college and grad school as I could, and I did internship, figuring if I met enough good people, that would get me into the film business. And the summer of my 2 years of grad school, I was an intern at HBO, and I got 2 offers when I left. One was to go work in a cubicle at HBO in a very good, solid job, and the other was to go work at some new company I never heard of that was the home video business, which was growing in those days. It was new and growing, but that job, I could be in production, and I could run a film slate, and I had an incredible responsibility, but we didn't know if that company would last, and thank goodness I took that risk.
And that company is Vestron, video and Vestron movies, pictures, and they also produced one of the films that we saw here, but everybody thought it was going to be a major failure, and that was
Dirty Dancing, you mean?
Dirty Dancing.
Well, there were 2, yeah. So Dirty Dancing, I'll tell you a story. So Dirty Dancing was a movie we bought from another studio because they tried to make it and they didn't like the script and they threw it away. So we bought the movie to make it and it wasn't going very, very well. And the song Time of Your Life, you know, the big song from the movie, was originally not this song. It was a high falsetto, meaning, I'm heaven, and the whole thing was a mess. And so someone in our company knew a kind of music legend named Jimmy Einer, who lived near us, and Jimmy agreed to come and work on it, and Jimmy brought in another incredible music producer named Michael Loy. And they set out to fix Dirty Dancing. And as the head of a production of a company that had to make 80 movies a year, once I knew I had Jimmy and Michael, we're good. And so Jimmy and Michael set out the first thing they set out to do was fix that song. And they had to make it lower and different. And so they got it. No one wanted to sing it. This was a little nothing movie from a company in the Northeast, not even in LA. And they got a well-known rock star from like the 60s to sing it as a favor. And that's in a much lower voice. And so they sent out the song to everyone, to the managers, to the record company, to the director of the movie. And the note that came back was, we don't like it. We have to fix it. You have to change this. You have to change that. And Jimmy and Michael said, okay, no problem. We'll change it. We'll make all the changes. 3 weeks later, they sent them a note saying, we made the changes and we sent the song to radio stations. In those days, radio stations would help you promote music. And everyone said, oh, great, thank you. We love version 2. It's fantastic. So the question is, what musical genius thing did Michael and Jimmy do between version 1 and version 2? The answer? Nothing. They didn't change a thing. They changed the name to version 2, and they doubled down. They doubled down on their bet, and so you have somebody, everyone says, we don't like, Ido says, I don't like this. And I say, great, I'm sending it to him. And they sent it to more people. And once they knew the radio stations liked it, everyone jumped on board. That song, that year, won the Grammy Award for Best Song and the Academy Award for the Best Song. Because Jimmy and Michael knew the value of their idea, and they never, ever, ever gave up on it. And that, to me, is a really important point. Once you get your crazy touch of the madness idea, never, ever, ever, ever give up on it, because everyone's going to tell you it sucks. Don't listen. You know, people tell you should listen to other people more. I'm telling you should listen to people less.
And here we were getting more into the madness that is required
Exactly.
to do what you're doing.
Yeah, it's total madness because you have to be willing to have this mad, passionate thing that I'm right and you're wrong. People in my life, my friends, my family, my people at work would say, oh, so you know and everyone does it. And I would say, well, in this case, yes.
Now you
have to think that, by the way.
When you were at Vestron, which was apparently an invaluable experience in your career.
Amazing.
And the company was based in Connecticut, right?
Well, Connecticut and then New York and Los Angeles, but initially Connecticut, which is just outside of New York.
And you also had a chance, and I think we are all very excited to hear about your memories from working on Platoon, which is considered one of the best movies ever.
Well, so Platoon, so my first job was to make 80 movies a year, 80, buy them, make them, co-produce them, don't lose money. And we were making horror movies and low-budget action movies. And Platoon, if you don't know, is a very serious movie about the Vietnam War and its effect on the kids in it. And it had a very new way of doing it. No one in it was a star. They all became stars. The director had made one movie which we also had financed, which I love, but it didn't do any business. But I fought for it. I wanted to do it. My boss was a great guy. Said, okay, you're head of production. It's your decision. But if you fail, you're fired. What are you going to do? He's always a but. You got to take a shot. And I couldn't believe I had to make this risk, but I thought, I didn't get into the movie business to play it safe. I just said, oh, you guys don't play it safe. So we took the risk. And I saw Platoon for the first time, and they showed it to me finished. I laughed my way through it because I was like, oh my God, it's good, I'm not getting fired. It actually won Best Picture that year at the Academy Award. And so I ran into Oliver Stone, the director, at a bar in New York a few months later, and he bought me a drink, and he said, you know, kid, I always liked you. You have a touch of the madness. And I thought, am I a touch of the madness? He called me crazy? Am I crazy? But then I thought, well, my boss was crazy to let a 25-year-old kid run a 80-picture film slate. Oliver was crazy to make a Vietnam War movie in the way that no one else wanted to. And I was crazy to bet the best job of my life on it. But that's when it occurred to me that innovation demands a touch of the madness, and that's been my mantra throughout my career. It's what I tell my staff, it's what I tell people in my films. I wrote a book that's coming out in a few months called A Touch of the Madness. It's the if I impart one thing to you guys, leave here with a little more of a touch of the madness than you came.
Well, we'll dive into this as we progress in the master class, but I just want to go back to Platoon for a second. So Platoon is known as really a movie that built many careers, right?
Right, many,
Willem Dafoe, Tom Berenger, all those guys, and of course Oliver Stone himself. And so, did you have any other experience? Because you singled out True Lies. You said True Lies was a safe bet. Why was that a safe bet?
Well, because we had just come off Terminator 2, and it was the same director, it was the same star, it was basically Terminator 2 was James Bond with a family. It was just a good idea, it was fun. So I don't recall people telling me I was crazy to make that. The way we made it was a little bit crazy because it was very expensive and a lot of deal-making stuff that went into it. But no, people, other than that though, I mean...
And there was some also criticism in Hollywood about the portrayal of Arabs, if I remember correctly, when the movie came out.
We got letters for years. But, you know, I never even think about that. Because honestly, that was just a line in a script somewhere. It was supposed to be a made-up bad guy. It was a comedy, so that wasn't really serious.
Yeah, but it was a you say, you know, did not require a touch of madness.
No. You know, when I tell these stories, I try and tell you the fun stuff that you can take with you. Some of the other stuff that actually went into doing it. So, for example, you know, I believe one of the things you have to do is ask anybody anything. You were just explaining to me Mitzliach.
Shitat Matzliach.
Yeah, right.
And you fell in love with Shitat Matzliach.
Yeah, because I think you got to ask anybody anything you want. And so, True Lies is based on a French movie called La Totale. And so we got the script, we got Arnold, Jim wanted to do it, we got the studio, we got the money. You know, we didn't have the rights to La Totale. And it turns out they were owned by another producer who was much older, much more accomplished than I was then. And there was no reason for him to do this. And so it was up to me. I had to call this guy and say, listen, so we got everyone to make this movie, and it's based on La Totale. And will you just give us the rights? Because all these really popular, famous people in Hollywood would be really happy if you did. And I was really kind of strong-arming him because he couldn't say no to all these people in talent agencies, and he did. So there were a lot of things that went into making the movie that were crazy, the money, how we raised it. No, there was a ton of touch of the madness in that movie, but people didn't tell me my career was going to be over before that one. They liked the idea.
Now, based on the little reel that you shared with us, clearly...
Little reel?
You have really a touch of gold. You really have a nose to understand what would work and what can you share with our audience? You know, the main insights.
Well, first of all,
how to select projects.
Well, so first of all, thank you for saying that. But you know, I made hundreds of movies, so you can pick the best ones and make it look like when you come to Israel, everything I touch turns to gold, but it doesn't. And so the first thing is, you just don't be discouraged if it doesn't. If you're a boxer, like a fighter, you're the best fighter in the world, and you win every match, you still get hit 50 times a round. 50 times every 3 minutes you get hit if you win. So these are great. I'm so proud of them. And we've done other great things, but we've done a lot of misses too, or a lot of things, you know, I made some of the worst movies you can imagine. And so you never let that stop you. You just get up the next day and you gotta play it like a game. So if you're a professional boxer, baseball player, soccer player, or whatever, football player, and you lose one game, you get up the next day, you shake it off and you play it again. That's really the main first thing. You can't ever give up. And you've got to have a little fun while you're doing it. You've got to play it like a game. I mean, some of the movies I made early on, which I thought were so bad, and I'm telling you they are, but I found out they're still screening today, like 30 years later, because they're extreme. So that's the same thing we said earlier. Take a shot, go wild, try something crazy, and just never give up. And if it doesn't work, try again.
Now, many of the things that you did branched out of the film industry, like you did a theme park, music, video games. How did you come up with the idea or tell us about the connection to the Mortal Kombat brand?
Well, when we were making Terminator 2, it was at the time the most expensive movie ever made. And that was incredibly exciting because of the creativity that was going on around it. But if something went wrong and it didn't work, goodbye career. It would have been the biggest flop in history. So in trying to make sure we had every base covered, and we had all the money and promotion we could, we did the same thing. We set out to look at, I started looking at movies like Terminator and Mortal Kombat like a pie, like an intellectual property pie. And you have to think of it as a bunch of slices. And one slice is the movie, but another slice is the album and the video game and the arcade game and the animated series and the merchandise and the theme park ride. And if you look at yourself in the pie business and not in the slice business, you can maximize the amount of money and the amount of exposure you get, because an audience today has so many ways to consume movies that I believe you have to do that. I believe that's the business. When I went to do Mortal Kombat, there had never been a successful movie from a video game. That everyone really told me I was crazy. But I promised the game owners, the company I licensed it from, that if they let me do it, I would produce it in every medium in the world: movies, TV, animation, live tours, and we did. And that was the plan from absolute day one, to do that. And the movie I told you about 2 minutes ago, we plan the same thing. We plan that all the time now. I think it's fun, and I think it's good business, and we make the theme park rides ourselves. So we make movies and theme park rides.
So that was an innovative approach to filmmaking, the pie approach as opposed to the slice approach.
Yeah, it was then. Now everyone's doing it, but it was then. That's actually how I financed my company.
So how did you adjust to the changes in the film industry? The way films are being made today is very different than what it used to be when you entered the industry.
Because the film business has always changed. You got to get used to it. If you want a nice, safe, predictable business, I don't know, be an accountant, but it's not in the film business, because it changed. You know, when everyone says, "Well, what's it like now?" They're streaming, but it's always changed. Read film history. I don't know if you guys have to, but if you don't, I would suggest you do. It always changes. That's the game. It's not, and your lives making, as if you stay in the business, are not going to be the lives of your friends who aren't in the business, because it's always like this. And you just got to get used to it. You got to strap in for the ride.
So I remember when I lived in Los Angeles in the early 1990s, that's where my son Adam was born. The big change was that the industry moved from the big studio system to the agencies, right? The agent was the kingmaker. The agent had access to the director, to the stars, to the music producer, to the whatever. Now everybody's talking about the power that is given to the big streaming platforms. So the power shifted to the platforms. What do you think is going to happen next, in your estimation?
I think the future of movies is globalization. So in most of the history of the movie business as we all know it in first world companies, all the money comes, 90% of the money comes from North America, Japan and Korea, and Western Europe. That's 20% of the world by population. So 80% of the world, for the history of the movie business until very recently, has not really had the benefit of seeing our movies, and we have not had the benefit of having them see our movies. Technology changes that. You can reach virtually anyone, anywhere in the world with a cell phone and a signal now. And so that means there are 5 billion people who are rapidly coming online to watch the movies we make. And therefore, we better make sure we make movies. The same movie that will work in Los Angeles, in Tel Aviv, and London should work in Nairobi, in Mumbai, and Shanghai. And that's what I think the future is.
Now let's talk about the book. So
Yes,
tell us
book.
what prompted, other than that conversation that had many, many years ago with Oliver Stone over a glass of beer, what prompted you to write the book?
I wrote the book because I think people today who I meet, especially guys like you, well, I shouldn't say that because I don't know you all that well, but certainly in the United States, people in film schools are scared to be their most creative selves. I think there's a fear of being really creative. I meet so many people who say, well, you know, I want to write this story, but I don't know, maybe I can't, or maybe I'll offend someone, or I think people are scared to be their most creative selves. And I wrote the book to try and encourage and inspire people not to be scared to be your most creative selves for 2 reasons. 1, it will be personally fulfilling to you, but 2, it will make you the most successful. And it's only fear that's stopping people. So my goal with A Touch of the Madness is to break you of that fear. And when I tell people about it, you wouldn't believe the amount of people who then confess to me, well, what I really want to do is open the yoga studio. What I really want to do, and that's what you should do. That crazy idea in the back of your mind that you think will never work and you can never do, and your parents will kill you if you do it, that's the one you should do.
And how do you remove the barriers? Because you're talking about globalization, and after all, you know, I don't know if you know that, but 95% of the people that work in the entertainment industry in North America, US and Canada, live in LA. So how do we help them to become more global in the way they understand the world?
Well, look at Israel. I mean, you guys have been incredible about making TV formats that are playing all over the world now. You don't have to live anywhere, and I think that number is changing because people work remotely and they work online. And you know, the other thing I'm doing in Israel and Jordan these last 2 weeks, other than this, is prepping a movie that's going to shoot here in Jordan and then all across the Silk Road into China. It's a treasure hunting movie. So you got to go. You got to do it. I have to come to Israel. I can't just say I want to. I was scouting around the Wadi Rum Desert last week. And you have to go do it. You have to go.
And you always come up with ideas. Every time I meet with you, you have a different idea. One time I met with you, you had this idea about an online channel with Black Belt.
Yeah, we did that. We're relaunching it.
So tell us about it.
Okay, so we Mortal Kombat has been so good to us, and we just got to know the world of martial arts very, very well, and we believe the world is underserved. So several years ago, we started on a whim a linear cable TV channel called Black Belt TV, martial arts, sports and entertainment, movies, video games, movie stars, fights, best of, instructions, the whole thing, and it was very successful. We were like in 60 countries. And then we wanted to switch to become streaming, and the deals we had with the cable operators prevented us from doing that unless we stopped broadcasting for a year and a half, which we did so we could re-own the rights. And then the pandemic happened, so we had to stop. And now that the pandemic is over, we're relaunching Black Belt TV as a streaming service. But here's what I think. I think there's a new world of streaming. So if you look at streaming services now, they're great, but they serve 200 million people and they're losing money. If you look at probably before your guys' time, the magazine business around the world, there used to be tons of magazines, and there were one or two big ones, Time or Newsweek, if you've ever heard of those, or even newspapers, you know, the New York Times used to be printed. But then there were a ton of little magazines that catered to special interests, so niche magazines. You could get one for sports, or one for fashion, or one for makeup. And I think streaming is going to go that way. I think people are not going to be able to afford, nor do they need, 15 huge streaming services, too much money. And they're not distinctive. I think they'll get one or two, and then they'll get the ones or two that really appeal to their own niches. So we now can start a streaming service with a few million subscribers. We can be wildly successful because of the way we can produce it and the technology that allows us to get a signal to anyone in the world. Remember, a few years ago, if I wanted people in South Africa to watch my shows, I had to go through a lot of actual other stations. Now I can just go direct if they have it's an app. So it changes it. So I think the nature of streaming is going to change, and we're all going to have different streaming sites based on what we want. If I asked any of you guys what streaming sites do you have, and what streaming services do you have, and what are their personalities, you couldn't tell me, because they don't, I mean, they're great, but they don't have personalities. I think that's what's going to happen. So we're relaunching Black Belt TV with a new thing. We don't want everyone in the world. So a company in India offered us 100 million subscribers, but you know, as a free, and we'd have to sell advertising. I said, I'd rather have 100,000 subscribers who pay, because that's all I need from you. I don't have to go to India. So we want not any customer, we want only our best customer. Only people who just love it, love it, love it, and if you don't love it, I'd be the first to tell you, don't buy it.
That's a very profound insight that you're providing.
Profound.
Because what you're telling us is, first of all, that the future is bright for the industry, which I think everybody likes to hear. Secondly, that we're looking at segmentation, really, of streaming services, which would do only great things for the industry. You had some...
Can I comment on that for a second? I think the future is incredibly bright. And I think everyone who talks about it not being bright is just wrong. And I don't think they've been I think, again, it goes back to what I said, it's just fear. It's fear that's saying, oh no, what if this, what if that? It's fear of not being your best creative self and saying, you know what, I'm gonna make a crazy, edgy movie. I'm gonna make a movie that no one ever did. Just because I told you, everyone told me these movies wouldn't work, you can pick a lot of great movies over history, and that's what happened. happens. So everybody says the movie business is dead. No, it's not. The numbers are astounding, and they're doing better. And they're going to keep doing better as long as we have a touch of the madness, meaning no fear, and we are our best creative selves. So yeah, I'm incredibly optimistic on the nature of the business.
By the way, you know, the whole idea of Steve Tisch sponsoring this film started from a conversation in November of 1994 around a lunch table when we hosted Itzhak Rabin in LA. And from a conversation where Steve Tisch was talking about how difficult it was to produce Forrest Gump, that no one really believed in the project.
Who the hell would make that movie? It sounds crazy, but that's what Steve did. That's great. That's what we need. So the future's bright. Don't believe everyone tells you this. And that's just pandemic residue bullshit. Don't believe it.
And thank you for being so direct. And I think it's important for us.
Israel.
Yeah, it's exactly. And that which leads, it's a perfect segue to my next question, which is, tell us a little bit about your dealings with Israelis. We spoke about early on, you know, the first festival in 1986, our guest of honor, like what you are now, our chairman was Menachem Golan, a late legendary Israeli producer who was really relentless in his energy and his love for filmmaking. And he brought, by the way, this is just a side note, how the world has changed. The guest of honor was actress Kelly McGillis, if any of you remember her from Top Gun, the first Top Gun. So you had some dealings with Israelis, and you said something very interesting about the Golan approach to filmmaking back in the 1980s.
Well, Menachem, who I knew and who once offered me a job as head of production of his company, these guys were what, I don't know if you know the term scoundrel, but it means lovable thief. So it means kind of a guy who comes to town and takes you out and you have a great time, you have the best weekend of your life, and then when he leaves, you realize he was using your credit card. But you still had a great time. So the early film business, when I got into it, was full of these lovable scoundrels. And Menachem was one of them. And so they'd say anything, they'd do anything, they'd ask anything, talk about mitzliach, but they got movies made. And that is a little different. The world is a little more corporate today. So I love these guys, and especially the Israeli ones, because they were just so direct. They'd ask anybody for anything. A big part of what you have to do, and I don't think you guys are, but is not be afraid to ask. We did an animated movie like a year and a half ago called Bobbleheads, characters bobble their heads. And we wanted Cher, who Cher is, the very iconic actress, singer, to be in the movie. And she did, and we even used her image, so it wasn't a character. She played Bobblehead Cher. And when the movie came out through Universal during the pandemic, People magazine said to Cher, why, you've never done an animated movie, why did you say yes to this one? And she said, I've never done an animated movie because no one ever asked me to. I did. So if Cher is sitting there, not being called, can you imagine who in your life you want to ask a question to, but you don't because you think, oh, people must have asked them a million times. Well, no one asked Cher, arguably the most famous woman on the planet, to do an animated movie until I did. So let me ask you guys a question. Can I ask them a question?
Sure.
Okay. So if I said to you, you can call anybody you want in the world right now, but a real live person, who would you call and what would you ask them?
Spielberg. I would call you and show you my script.
Good.
That's what I'm going to do.
All right, good. That's what you should do. Okay, good. See, this is the only problem.
Did you hear what he said? He said, I said this just because we're being recorded. The nice gentleman here said, I would call you and I'll show you my script.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I call my friend.
What?
I call my friend just to talk to him. Not a good answer.
You'll call your friend.
You call your
that's-
friend.
By the way, that's a great
okay.
beginning of a great script.
Go ahead.
I would call you and ask if there is any role to audition for.
So, okay, but had I not said this right now, would you still have called me? Okay, you're good.
I will do it.
Most people don't know how to answer that question, or if they answer it, they haven't done it because they think they can't. You can't. I've been doing this since college. I had a great professor in college who told me this. I went to Cornell undergrad, and then when I was in grad school, I went to Wharton. One of my big term paper was on Warner Brothers. And so I thought, how am I going to learn all this? So I called the CEO of Warner Brothers as a student. And he talked to me for an hour. I got so excited about Warner Brothers, I did a stupid thing. I took my student loan and I bought Warner Brothers stock with it, which really was a dumb idea. Unfortunately, it turned out well. But I mean, but he called me back. So call anybody and ask them anything. Anybody. I mean, everyone says, well, gee, I wish I could show my script to so-and-so. Whether I say it or you should call me. I actually like it when people do that. Call anybody you want and ask them anything.
And just to give him credit, we have here a young filmmaker, Keren Ahmad. Where is Keren?
Here.
And Keren is, she has a feature film coming out called TISFF, which we would like to express, our hopes that the film will do great. And Keren sent an email to Larry, doesn't know him, and he took the time to provide her with a very detailed response about how she should go about distributing the film in North America. And so you walk the walk.
Yeah, listen, Ido and I have been friends for years, and he does incredible, he knows everybody in the world, this guy, and he introduces me to great people. So if he introduces me to 3 great people, rather than saying thank you so much, I go, where's the 4th? I just did it.
Yeah,
you just gotta ask.
Coming up, I promise you. I promise you.
You just gotta ask everybody everything. You gotta have that spirit, that personality. You gotta go for it.
And I think that it's a wonderful opportunity for us again. When we're grateful that you're here, and that you're giving us this access, which knowing the Israelis, they'll take advantage of it. Definitely, for sure. So what's next for you? So the book is coming out. You're touring, speaking about the book.
So I'm touring, speaking about the book. You can pre-order it on Amazon, A Touch of the Madness, or any place where they sell books. During the pandemic, we developed 20 movies. We decided to double down. The first one of those we announced last week is a movie, an animated movie based on Simon Cowell's show, The X Factor. You guys know The X Factor? There's an X Factor in Israel. So this movie is called X Factor in the Jungle. Where jungle animals find a discarded karaoke machine, and they start their own version of the show. So, and the director of Beauty and the Beast is directing it, and I'm producing it with Simon, and we got a bunch of other great people involved in it. So that's next, and we haven't announced it, so we can't hear it, but the treasure hunting movie I'm working on when I'm in Israel too is to come soon thereafter. We've just got a bunch of movies, and we're going to relaunch Black Belt and the book. So that's what we're doing.
And you have an actual studio in Santa Monica.
Yes, we do.
With animated stations, I've seen in my own eyes.
Yeah, but that's actually changing because during the so we have a big studio in West Los Angeles, but that's actually changing because during the pandemic, when people couldn't come in, we started working with Microsoft to build a worldwide production platform and outsource, well, not outsource, but hire animators from all over the world. And it worked incredibly well, so well that pandemic or not, we're not bringing them back. Because it's not only efficient, and it's not only faster, and it's not only better, and it's not only cheaper, but you get the benefit of, which we didn't know, of having all these cultural input from people around the world. So when we're making bobbleheads, it turns out bobbleheads were invented in India in the 800s. And the studio was very concerned with how we were going to actually bobble the heads. And as we're talking to the animators about it, we're realizing they're all bobbling their heads. Because this was their culture. It'd be like, Jewish people always talk like this. Well, let's say so they were incredibly helpful. So yeah, so that way we make the movies is different now, and we use this worldwide production network, all in the Azure cloud with Microsoft, and it's phenomenal. And it's creatively better, it's economically better, it's faster, it's wonderful.
And let's hope that this will also open more opportunities for young Israelis to be part of your process.
Well, it does, because if there are 3 people here who are good animators, we can hire them. They don't have to go anywhere, which we couldn't before.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, at this point, I'd like to turn the discussion to the audience, and I'd like to take questions. Please, when you ask a question, raise your hand. And if you can tell us your name, your organizational affiliation, and then ask your question, give me an opportunity to rephrase or repeat the question so for the benefit of the video. We'll start with the nice gentleman over there.
Okay, so hi and welcome, Larry. I'm Ohad. I just finished my MFA at the digital media track, part of the TISFF school. My question is that many of us perceive the director as being responsible for the artistic side of the project, and the producer as the responsible for the more business side of the project. And my question is, what artistic aspects do you find in the producer's role?
So if I may rephrase Ohad's question from the Tisch school, the traditional distinction between the director, the auteur, and the producer is less connected to the creative side. Is that so?
Well, it's not in my case. And you know, these terms, producer, director, executive producer, music supervisor, they're not legal terms. They're not scientific terms. So they vary. A producer does everything. A producer is the first person to come up with the idea and the last person to leave. I have movies from 20 years ago, they still call me. So the producer does everything. But your job as a producer, and again, remember, you work for the audience, is to make sure the audience gets the movie that's in your head. If you have a wonderfully creative director who understands all the shots, you don't have to, you've got something else to deal with. Theoretically, every movie you say, if I set this up right in pre-production, I can go to the beach. Never happened to me in 250 million. So sometimes you have to be the strength as a producer wherever there's a weakness. And if the weakness is creative, that's where you have to be the strength. If the weakness is they're slow, you have to be fast. If the weakness is, you know, someone doesn't like that you're in their backyard shooting, you gotta do that. You gotta do whatever it takes to get the shot. I think to myself all day long, get the shot, get the shot, get the shot. I happen to write a lot of our movies as well, so I'm very involved. In the first Mortal Kombat movie, I approved every little shoelace, everything, because this was the beginning of this franchise. Other movies, like Dirty Dancing, where we had Michael and Jimmy, they're the geniuses behind that movie, not me. So you don't have to. You have to understand what you need to get the movie you want the audience to see. Not that I want. We're all custodians of the audience. I can't emphasize that enough.
Amazing.
Make sense?
Yes, please.
My name is Guy. I'm a student at the TISFF University, a writer and director. And you talk about films being distributed to much larger audiences, but still you need to be creative and innovative. But if you want to appeal to large audiences from different backgrounds, you need to go to a more streamlined concepts which everybody can understand. So it's kind of a contradiction.
So, Guy?
Yeah.
Guy from Tisch is asking if your vision of globalization of content will not dumb down the message or the content.
No, I think Guy is saying that to get it, yeah, to get a huge audience, you have to be more in the middle. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Guy, with all due respect, could not disagree with you more. So let's look at, forget about my movies, let's look at Star Wars. Pretty successful, right? Fox hated it. He thought it was a piece of crap. That's why George Lucas got all the merchandising rights and the sequel rights, because they kept reducing his fee. I actually stole his deal for Mortal Kombat, and I did the same thing, because everyone did it. So Star Wars was made, because people didn't think it would work. So Star Wars was worked that way. Do you know Ice Age? You ever see the movies Ice Age? Huge. So Fox decides to hire an animation studio to make Ice Age, and the animation studio went bankrupt. And so Fox had to buy them. And now they saw the movie, they thought it was the biggest, let's say, they did not think it was a successful movie, and they got your Israeli friend Arnon Milchan, if you know who he is, to agree to distribute it for them. Arnon sees the movie, and I've seen this letter, and they said, they wrote a letter to Fox, Arnon's company, who they worked with all the time, saying, listen, we love you guys, we'll do anything for you, we just can't possibly do this, it's just so bad. And they sent it back, and they reneged on the deal. It's one of their most successful franchises. We can go on and on and on and on and on. It took Spider-Man 25 years to get to the screen. 25 years to get Spider-Man to the screen. So in most cases, when you make that decision to do something extraordinary and different and crazy, you're not appealing to less people. You're appealing to more people.
Can I refine the question?
Yeah.
If I want to make local stories, let's say Fauda or Tehran, if you've heard about them.
Yeah.
Like, it's really local, and someone in Mumbai will not get it, maybe. See what I'm not getting? Like, if you go to many cultures, your culture...
So, sure. So he's saying, what if you want to do a movie that's just local, based on local culture?
Yes.
So here's the thing. You have to decide what the audience for your movie is. You know, I say you work for the audience. Maybe you don't want to make movies for the whole world. Maybe you want to make movies for your neighborhood. Maybe you want to make movies for just older men. You can decide whatever you want. But once you decide, that's what you have to do. Like I have a pretty good sense when I make movies of who my audience is. And it's for that audience. Everything doesn't, just because I believe and I'm working on global projects, you don't have to. But you got to know the audience you are working for.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Mai. I want to audition for him, I just kidding.
Well, stand up and do something. Come on. What do you got? Sing a song.
So I also study film in Kennedy University, and I ask, like, what makes a film so interesting, or project so interesting to you to work on? Like, what are the elements of a hit movie that you know, oh, that is going to be amazing?
Okay, so you want to rephrase the question for the video?
Sure. So the question is, what makes a movie a hit movie, and what makes it work on? And boy, if I could tell you that, you know,
He would win the Nobel Prize in
I'd be talking to you
chemistry.
from my space station somewhere.
Or maybe what makes a movie like interesting for you to work
Right.
on?
So what makes a movie interesting for me? Well, a few things. So first of all, big surprise. I have to feel it has a touch of the madness. I have to feel there's something wild and crazy. Second thing, I analyze it two ways. Do I love it creatively? Forget about the business. And then I forget about the creative, and do I think it's a good business? So they both have to be yeses. The third thing is, do I just keep thinking about it? I make the movies, it's like buying art. It's the ones that I'm thinking about when I'm riding my bike and walking my dog. And they're the ones I just can't get out of my head. And that combination is what compels me to make a movie. And I did some press for this festival, and one of the reporters told me an idea she had for a movie. I think it's great, and it just strikes you. And then if it stays with you, you do it. And then you know, you do some research, like the creative and the business thing. So it's a combination of that. But I have to feel that I go, you know what? Because when you get a hold of a movie as a producer or a director, you're going to be on that movie maybe for 1 year, but maybe like Spider-Man for 25 years. So it's like a new friend. I think about the characters in my movies as friends. I'll say to myself, gee, Lucian Fabulous would say that. He's in the Simon's movie. You better like it. You better love it, because you're going to be talking about it for a long, long time.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Ali. I'm also from digital media here in the university. First of all, I want to say thank you, because I'm working on my final project, and everyone are telling me I'm crazy and it's never going to work.
Go ahead, be a hit.
Hopefully an autistic superhero. Let's try it.
An autistic superhero?
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, because you talked earlier about how everyone are afraid from the future of film and all the advances that there are currently. What are your thoughts about the fear around AI and interactivity and all those new technologies that are intimidating for some people about how they're going to influence the film industry?
Let's eliminate a warning, as he's asking.
Well, yeah, so she's asking what do I think about AI in film. So, artificial intelligence. So you're right, because in the last few months, I've seen and read articles that are very reminiscent of discussions we had on Terminator 2, which, if you haven't seen it, is a movie about the computers who take over the world, or the robots who take over the world. And it's incredibly similar. It's really spooky for me. It's incredibly similar. And so I've been fortunate in some of the reel you saw that I really like the juxtaposition, the nexus of entertainment and technology. And when we did morphing, it was going to change the world, and it was amazing, and it did. And some of the stuff we've done in theme parks have been new, and the first movie from a video game. So I'm a big proponent of technology and entertainment. And I think AI it's almost unfathomable, ununderstandable. Because the writers don't want you to be able to press a button and write a script. But what if you could press a button and write a script? What if that script was pretty good? We still don't know this yet. So, but here's the deal. You can't stop a new technology from coming. It's like a tidal wave. It's going to come. If it can be invented, it's going to be invented. So it's coming. And so the question is not whether we like it or not. The question is how to learn how to use it to make our films better. Because everyone else is going to. So you got to embrace it.
Yes, please.
So I'm also a student at the university. I wanted to know more about your workflow. When you get a script, what do you do after?
Workflow. Send it to Ido. When we get a script, what do we do? Well, mostly we write our own scripts. Because there's two ways of living certainly in Hollywood. You can get scripts sent to you all the time, and then you're being, and read them, and if you're trying to read them faster than the next guy, and then buy them first. But then you're kind of being very reactive. So I much more, someone asked me earlier, how do I decide on a movie? I more decide on an idea, and then I pursue the idea, and then I either write with someone or I hire writers to write the script. So once I'm reading a script, we've already been involved for a long, long time. And it's the idea that happens. And then every movie has kind of like, if you start like a fire in the woods, it has kind of a spark that catches. And what's the spark in each movie? And the spark in some movies are different than the spark in other movies. What's the spark that catches this movie? Our animated movie with bobbleheads, honestly, once Cher agreed to do it, it did change the nature of the movie. And so that took calling someone who you'd think you couldn't call. So I pursue the idea, and then we develop all our own movies. We almost never read outside scripts. Yes, please.
So I'm Anastasia, I'm a student too, and I'm a freelancer, and I wanted to ask you, how do you deal with failure?
How do we deal with failure? That's a good question. It sucks. You gotta, take a day or two, and I like the beach, and I like dogs, and I like ice cream, and you gotta shake, and then you wake up and you shake yourself off, because you think to yourself, well, every second I'm sitting here moaning what happened yesterday, I'm not making a script for tomorrow. So ultimately, the best way I deal with it is by pursuing another project. Yes, please.
Hi, Larry. How are you?
Hey, dude.
I wanted to ask you, because you talked about how you're using international people for your animation projects.
Right.
And that sounds great, but as you know, every culture and every country has their own way of working on a film, different methods, different way of communicating, and different work abilities. How do you deal with so many different cultures, and you find a middle point to communicate?
All right, so Matan asks a really, really good question, which is how do you, when you work with all these different cultures on an animated worldwide network, how do you fuse all the cultures together? So I'll tell you a story. When we started doing this, there was a guy, one of the animators, who was great, and he was working on a character, and I said, good, and we wanted to give him Paul Newman eyes. Paul Newman was a very famous movie star in like the 1960s and 70s who had very piercing blue eyes. And the next week I looked at the guy's work on our network, and great, but Paul Newman eyes. This happened for like 5 weeks, and he was great. So I couldn't figure it out. So the 5th week, I finally said to him, in front of everybody, which is a little embarrassing to them, listen, you're doing great work, but why won't you give me Paul Newman eyes? And he said, who's Paul Newman? And so you learn two things right there. First of all, in certain cultures, like in Nepal, China, India, it's considered really, really rude to ask your boss a question, no matter what it is. It's just not considered rude to do it. So that was one. And two, I learned that Paul Newman was not a good worldwide reference anymore. But what you have to do is you have to take a little time to get to know their customs and to have them trust you. And so even though we do work in a worldwide network, when we do this, I go several times all around the world and I visit all these people and get to know them. And in that case, all you have to say to the people in India, for example, and Nepal is, you can ask me, you can be direct now. And now they're completely direct with me. But it's a great question, because that is hard to fuse that. You just need to be a little patient. The US Special Forces have a saying, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You go a little slower, you get more done. That's what you got to do.
Well, we have one more question here.
Yes, hi, my name is Maya, I'm also a student in TISFF, and I have a question. You say all through this talk that you should be innovative, a little bit mad, but in reality, as I see it, you're very optimistic, I'm a little less, that there are a lot of remakes, like Lion King, Mermaid, The Little Mermaid, or now in HBO they're doing Harry Potter all over again. So as I feel the industry is going through like a nostalgic phase more than like an innovative phase. So what's your thoughts on that?
So she's saying, what is the impact in innovation from the series of remakes? And the industry isn't going through a nostalgic phase, as you put it. They're going through a safe phase, as you put it.
Yeah.
Because the idea of you got to understand, in the United States, for example, a TV show 20 years ago that was a hit had 20 or 25% of the American audience watching every night, watching that show. It was called a 25 rating. Today, a hit network TV show in the United States gets a 0.9 rating, less than 1%. So anyone who's going to invest a lot of money in something wants it to have that pre-promoted value. They want people to know what it is. So you can't blame them for being safe and doing that. But that's not going to work forever. Eventually you run out of it, and the audience is already starting to get sick of it. There was a superhero movie last 2 weeks that didn't do as well as they thought it was. So the audience is already starting to tire of it. So you can't blame a big company with a lot of shareholders for doing the right thing for their stock price, but now you gotta find something that is new, that's a new franchise. Or maybe it's another way of licensing something. Like as I mentioned, we're doing a movie based on Simon Cowell's The X Factor. That maybe is not the most obvious thing in the world, but it's the X Factor. It's a new idea. People laugh at it. The X Factor has been in 178 countries. So we just found a new take on a great brand. So find something that people know about, but they don't think they know about. Be innovative in that way. But don't say, well, they're making a Harry Potter. Well, you know, they gotta make money too, and we'll see if it works. But it only reinforces what I said. A touch of the madness is the way to do that. Do something crazy.
Are any more questions from the audience? Vered, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Vered. I'm not a student anymore. I just want to know if you have still dreams, wishful projects that you dream, or just do more of the same.
Excuse me, I didn't quite understand that.
What are your dreams? If you still have major dreams.
Oh, I'm obsessed by it. I only think about this kind of stuff when I come to places like this. I don't walk around going, gee, it was great making Mortal Kombat. No. I told you, I have 20 projects. I think about them all the time. I am just as, if not more excited about making movies today as I was the first day. I love all my projects. My dreams, all the movies I've developed.
Now you're also, from my knowledge, you're also obsessed with history. You love history. You love the history of the film industry. You love history, period. And when you're in Israel, when you're in this region, you take the time to visit historical sites and archaeological sites.
I think there are 1 million great stories hiding in plain sight, and you've got to get out into the world to find them. I mean, that's how the Treasure Hunter movie I'm making now, I found on a trip to Israel. I think there's great stuff. You can walk down the street, like I'm staying on Rothschild Boulevard, and it's really pretty. And here's what I see everyone doing as they're walking in the morning. So you can walk and not look, or you can walk and look, but the stories are there. Yara, did you have a question?
I have a question. How are the big hits on streaming services that are not screened at the movie theater, like Extraction, for example, are considered a hit or a flop? How are they making money? If there is not like
that is a
box
different
office.
Yeah, that is a different. So how are streaming services making money? That's a different. No, how are streaming movies making money?
Yeah.
It's a different financial model. You don't, as filmmakers and actors, you don't own a percentage of the back end. You get a fee up front, pretty good, and you really don't know because the streamers actually don't tell people their numbers. So we all perceive Extraction's a hit, and I think it's a great movie, but we don't really know. And that formula is a little uncomfortable because we now are in a situation where the streamers aren't, except for Netflix, aren't profitable. The filmmakers aren't terribly happy, so what's going to happen? I believe, but it's just my belief, that streaming services will go back to doing things that networks have done for years, which is rather than financing and owning the whole movie, they'll rent it for a while. They'll say for a year, it's called a window. For a year, that's what HBO used to do. For a year, we get it, and we're going to pay you 25% of the price for it, and then you own the movie. and think the economics will change. Because it's not sustainable, no one's making money.
Yeah.
And so the streamer can say, well, we spent $200 million on this movie, this many people watched, and we can allocate to it, but you know, overall, they're not making money. People went into streaming to make money and to raise their stock price. But now the stock prices of these companies have plummeted. So it's going to change.
And another assessment is that the streaming services will begin to produce other forms of content, such as news and sports and so on, which they'll need to be more diverse.
Second question about streaming services. You said about making niche services, niche movies, niche content. But I feel right now that there are like too much content, too much good films, too much good series. And the question is, don't you think that the industry need to shrink a little to get everybody paid better?
So,
if we can rephrase the question.
Yeah.
So he was asking about oversaturation of content if it's not reducing the level of the content.
So everyone I know,
On the payments.
On the payments.
so everyone I know and every article I read says that here's what people do at night. They click around, they find nothing to watch, and they watch reruns of Friends. So I don't think there's great stuff. I think there's some good stuff. But now ask yourself, of all the streaming services over the last several years, how many franchises, you know, a known franchise, a Mortal Kombat, a Spider-Man, as a streaming service created? And, you know, Game of Thrones was one, but that was HBO before it was a streaming service. So how many? I would think maybe a couple, a handful. So I don't think that's the case, because I just don't think they are. Because I think they're too conservative, they're too afraid to be creative, they're not using a touch of the madness. So I think that's what you have. So I don't agree with you. I mean, there's a lot of content, but if it were great, you would have been able to give me 15 answers to that question in 1 second.
By the way, for example, the new show on Netflix with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Fubar, is based on the brand that he created with you, with Full Life.
Fubar's great. Arnold's great.
Right, but it's the same persona.
Yeah, he's the first one to say it. He said it in an interview the other day. He's great.
Right. So I wanted to tell you a little story about Paul Newman. I never met Paul Newman, but when I served in Los Angeles, I was in charge also of Arizona, as it was a state legislator in Arizona. His name was Paul Newman, and he was from Nogales, Arizona, which is a border town with Mexico with no Jews, and he was Jewish. And I asked him, how were you able to get elected in Nogales, Arizona? It's the only Jew in Nogales. He says, because people thought I was Paul Newman, the name Paul Newman. He said they never saw a picture of me and they just voted for me. So, you know, some people didn't know Paul Newman. And of course here in Israel is a big name because of the movie Exodus and for the generation. Okay, folks. We have been blessed with Larry Kasanoff giving us the time and the attention. I cannot thank you enough. And enjoy the rest of the festival.
Thank you. Go out there and embrace the madness. Thank you, guys.
What? Human. Why does it mean straight? Something